Welcome to Relationship Real Talk, Live the Life's podcast. For over 20 years, we've been dedicated to strengthening marriages and families through relationship education. Our core goals are to reduce the Florida divorce rate by 50% by 2029, to increase the marriage rate, and reduce teen pregnancy and out-of-wedlock births. For more information about us, you can visit us at livethelife.org.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Relationship Real Talk. I have, of course, the Honorable Ashley next to me, and we're here with a special guest. You may have seen her on our last two podcasts ago when we had a little throwback episode. We have Lisa May with us. How you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem. Definitely got to shed light on our South Florida people for sure.
Yes.
For sure.
And what people may not know is that Lisa is actually originally from our Tally office.
Oh, yeah.
I have known her for probably too long to mention, right, Lisa? Let's keep ourselves young.
Yes.
But yeah, wow. It's been an awesome journey, long time that I've known you. So I'm so excited to do this episode with you. And so you want us to just dive right in?
Let's go ahead.
Dive right in. Awesome. So tell us a little bit about what got you into relationship education. What is bringing you into the sphere? What makes you passionate about things like Live the Life?
Okay. Well, it's really quite the story. My husband and I served on a nonprofit board together and many years ago. And Richard Albertson, who is the founder of Live the Life, actually worked there. And when my husband passed away, I moved to Tallahassee. I lived in Fort Lauderdale at the time. I moved to Tallahassee and people kept saying, we really want you to meet Dick Albertson. Well, I had no idea who Dick Albertson was because I only knew him as Richard Albertson. Mm-hmm. And during the year that my husband was ill, I had kind of lost track and kind of walked away from that other board, not knowing that Richard had decided he was going to found his own nonprofit because he felt so passionately about marriage. So I moved to Tallahassee. We had some common friends and we reconnected. And shortly thereafter, I was honored and that Richard had asked me to serve on his board of directors. And I did that for 2 or 3 years. And then he came to me and said, don't you want to go to work for Live the Life? And I was like, of course I do, but what am I going to do? And he said, I would really like for you to come on as a director of development and help us with some fundraising. And so that's really started, almost a 25-year relationship. And my passion for the ministry has grown in that God allowed me to become a single parent. When my husband passed away, I found myself to be the single parent, and I would have never dreamed that I would have that title. My kids were all young. My oldest was 14 and my youngest was 4. So all of a sudden I had this title of I'm a single parent, I'm a widow, I'm all these things, but God used those experiences for me to really develop a passion that I've always been passionate about families, but a marriage and a husband and wife being together, raising their children, to me is second only to Jesus. Mm-hmm. Because I saw firsthand, even in the best case scenario, I didn't have to run out and get a job right away. But the magnitude of mother and dad in the home, for one another, but particularly for children. So that's really where my passion and through the years I've lived the life and now me watching my children grow up under a single parent home. Like I said, even best case scenarios, there are things that a woman cannot bestow on her children that only a man can, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. But that is what keeps me going on those days in ministry, where you're like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell.
I love it. I love it because it makes sense. Even when we talked about the student programming on the other episode, and then seeing how passionate you are with actually holding programs down in South Florida for singles, people in that are actually in relationships. So just to know the backstory behind that, because that was new information. Some of it was. So
Mhm.
that's definitely interesting. So we have you here because we did a little poll on our Instagram about podcast topics. So one of the top topics was expressing emotions to a spouse in a healthy way.
Mhm.
And I mean, that's really all. That's live the
Yeah.
life in a nutshell.
Right.
What are some common challenges or barriers couples face when it comes to effectively communicating and expressing emotions? So what can you tell us from your coaching experience and just program experience as a whole?
One of the things I always try to remind a couple of is when you started dating, you were talking all the time. You couldn't wait to talk, and you could talk for hours about nothing and about everything, And I think what happens very often, particularly, as life comes in and children are born and the bills are due and somebody's sick, is that we forget that our really first priority after our relationship with Christ is really our spouse. And you have to prioritize and set aside time to be with that spouse so that you have the opportunity to connect. But what I see happen with couples once they begin to have children is the children become the priority, and
Mhm.
then the spouse takes second seat. And then before long, the spouse is in third seat, and then they're in fifth seat. And now somehow they're not connecting,
Mhm.
And I hear people come in and they'll say, well, we've just drifted apart. And my thoughts are, yeah, you have. Slowly but surely, you drift. It's very subtle. It's like going down a lazy river on an inner tube. It's slow. And then before you know it, you're at the waterfalls and you're like, how'd I get here? So I just really believe that they have to prioritize their time together first and foremost if they really want to continue bonding and having that effective communication.
And it's funny hearing you say that, and it's so common. I mean, of course, me being the youngest here, the least experienced, just hearing you say out loud that the couple usually puts their kids first. I mean, that's kind of a common thing that I hear a lot. It's always kids. So
Mhm.
even I can understand how that can go by the wayside, not focusing on the relationship. But what do you tell somebody who's the super mom or super dad that care about the kids? I just feel like, I don't know, maybe they'll respond to that a little side eye-ish a little bit.
Mhm. Well, I do believe that if you really care about your children, the best thing you can do is care about your spouse
Mhm.
because they learn everything um, in terms of emotions and their EQ. They learn it from watching mom and dad.
Yeah.
They'll either learn great habits or they'll learn poor things. We had the discussion the other day in the office about how one of the best gifts we can give our children is for them to understand that this is mom and dad time. Don't come in here for 15 minutes unless there's blood. Don't interrupt us.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think one of my favorite things about Live the Life is we're not just knowledge based, we're skills based. So let's say there is a couple that comes to you and they're like, "Oh my gosh, Lisa, like we heard what you were talking about, how it's so important for us to show each other like what we're feeling emotionally for us to emote in a healthy way. What's something you would tell them? Here's something you can do to show emotion in a healthy way." Exactly. What's something that you would tell a couple to do?
Well, it would depend on what kind of emotion they were wanting to show. Okay. If they were angry, really what sets Live the Life apart, and I've looked at a lot of curriculum over the last 20 or 25 years, it's really that we're skills based. There are many programs that are worthy, that are quality, that I would recommend, but they're more inspirational. They're not skills based, and Live the Life has really mastered that. So if it's a heated conversation, then of course I would talk to them about what we have known as our US card, which helps couples have a heated, for lack of a better word, conversation without it becoming hot. It allows them to manage their emotions so that they haven't insulted their spouse with their body language or their level of their voice. But I'm a huge fan of the skills that we teach. If they're wanting I want to connect with them about something that maybe I'm hurting about or I'm heavy-hearted with, then I would say, well, let me help you learn what a heart-to-heart conversation looks like. And, this is one of the things that I see misses now. We're in the second and third generation of families where all three generations, the current, the mom and dad, and the grandparents, they've all divorced, And so our kids are not, many of our kids are not growing up in homes where they see it. Okay. And so then they find themselves in a relationship as a young married couple, and they've not seen it, so they don't know how to manage it. And that is what we do well. I mean, we do it really well. If they were just like, you know what, we just kind of need to connect, then I would say, oh, well, we have one for that too, the daily temperature reading, So all of our skills that we teach in terms of communication, they are tools to help you connect with the person that you want to be the most connected to.
And hearing you talk about, the couple's feelings. I know in our Adventures in Marriage class, what is it? EQ, emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Can you just give a brief overview of that just for the people listening? Because it is important. The first step to even talking about feelings is knowing how you're feeling at the time.
That's good. That's good.
Right. Yeah. Well, we call it EQ versus IQ. Our IQ, it's going to tap out at a certain level. And it doesn't mean we can't always be a learner, but there's some things that we probably aren't going to grasp. As an example, for me, IQ, I don't know if y'all have ever seen that movie Hidden Figures, where those ladies are doing all those math, computations. I'm like, you know what? My IQ is way under that. I appreciate that they do it. I understand what they're trying to do, but there's no way I would ever have the capacity to do it. So that my IQ is maxed out. But the great thing about EQ, which is your emotional quotient, it never maxes out. You can always expand it. It can always be learned. So basically, what happens though with couples is that their chronological age very often doesn't match their emotional development.
Yeah.
And generally it is because of their environment as young people. They get traumatized, they get stuck, they don't know how to work it out, and then they get triggered, and then they react like they're 10 instead of that they're 32.
Right.
How
and something I kind of just thought about too is I know a lot of adults who were forced to grow up very fast.
Right.
And they're usually the ones with the lowest EQ. Because I think when we're children and we're safe, that's when we're allowed to explore emotion. That's when we're allowed to be safe in that environment. But when, even during the Great Depression, when these children were basically forced to go work or provide for their family, or, when a little boy has his father leave him and he's now the caretaker of his family, there's no longer any safety to have emotions. And so it's just funny. It's just weird that I just thought about that, how the faster a child is forced to grow up, the lower their EQ usually is.
I would agree, because they haven't had those childhood years. The formation all of a sudden really moved to survival. So yeah, you're right. But EQ can grow. And we, everybody comes from childhood with some baggage. Every single person, even in the best case scenario, we're going to leave that environment with some baggage. The difference is some people go with a carry-on and other people go with a truckload.
Yeah.
Very true.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you actually brought up safe spaces, because, we're dealing with everybody's emotions. How can a couple create that safe space and that safe environment to actually have that conversation? Yeah, we talked about our skills and it's amazing, but how can they actually start off?
Mhm.
Well, other than learning the skills themselves, they do have to prioritize their time. In other words, if I am upset about something and I need to discuss it, I think you have to respect whomever it is you need to have that conversation, whether it's your spouse, it's your children, or your co-laborer. And I believe in asking permission to have a conversation, and I believe in also asking for a time when that can happen. Because if I have something that I want to talk about and my spouse is maxed out and really can't do it today, then I think there needs to be respect there in that I've asked for it. He has said yes, but he has also said, I cannot do it today. Can we do it tomorrow night at 8:00?
Yeah.
And that's that first place, like I'm expecting it. You haven't sprung it on me, so I'm expecting it. I probably already have a good idea about what this conversation is going to be about. So I've had some time to think about it. I've had some time to emotionally prepare myself, and then set aside a space where you're not going to be interrupted. You're not going to be watching TV, and you certainly aren't going to have your cell phone on.
Yeah.
So what is some kickback you've heard from that? Because I know as soon as somebody say, "Oh, I have to ask my spouse for permission for a conversation," we've been arguing all day. I'm about to bring the heat when I come home. So what's some pushback people have given you about that? Even though it's great advice, though.
Well, this happened to me yesterday. I was having a conversation. And I said, there's something I'd like to talk to you about. Well, you know what? I should have known right off the bat. When men hear that, they don't ever assume that it's positive.
Never.
And the response that I got back was rolled eyes, was the first one. And then the second one was like, okay, go ahead. What is it? And I said, why is it that you think when I have something to say and I open with that it's negative? And the response was, because I've been hearing that same opening about a negative for more than 30 years. So when you open with that, I assume, oh, here it comes, Yeah. So I do believe that we need to also give one another cues and agreed upon cues, like, to me, to ask permission to have it, that is a huge respect. And it's also an act of humility. But I think sometimes you have to explain that. I'm respecting you, okay? And then I'm asking, all right? And you're respecting me in terms of you're honoring me through your humility, that you're willing to have that conversation at a different time. So I think if those things are set up beforehand, it's just like, when we teach the dirty fighting, we teach couples to come up with a code word or a symbol that's like, okay, you're heading towards dirty fighting. Well, you can't get mad at me about something that you've given me permission for, or that we've agreed to.
Yeah.
So that would be what I would say about, okay, can we have a conversation? And maybe that is the word. Can we have a conversation instead of I have something I want to talk to you about?
Yeah. I want to talk, or you want to talk, or we should talk. Yeah, probably not the best phrase to say for men.
Yeah, because he sounds just like me. It's just like, oh,
Yeah,
boy.
no, I know. Yeah,
Let's go ahead and
exactly.
talk about it. Get it over with.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, so you've been in this space for a long time. So what are some things, maybe some hindrances, some myths about being vulnerable or being emotional, whether it's from the male perspective or the female perspective? What are the biggest things that you wish you could tell people? This is not true. And even though this is a widely believed thing, this is not true about sharing your emotions or being vulnerable.
Men struggle much more with this, as everybody sitting here knows, than women. Women like to talk, I want to tell you how I'm feeling, men generally see that as weakness. They don't want to be perceived as weak, and it's crazy. I've heard this for many years. I'm sure you have too. Real men don't cry. Real men don't apologize. I would say that's exactly the opposite. Real men do cry, and real men do apologize. So, vulnerability for a woman is attractive. It is, women want a man to be strong, but there is strength in a man being willing to be vulnerable with you about his feelings. And so that I would definitely encourage men to take that chance. You'll be surprised at the response that you generally get. I don't know any woman you would want to be connected to for the rest of your life that would take that vulnerability and smash it rather than embrace it.
Yeah.
That's yes, perfect. Because that's a common thing. If you look at the whole, they call it the manosphere, the red pill, the whole how to be the best man. That's the first thing they'll tell men not to do, is to be vulnerable with a woman. And it's you said it perfectly. Why would you want to spend your whole life with somebody who would take and turn it or not even accept that? So I'm glad you said that. You hit it right on the money perfectly. Because that's you ask any male, they're going to say, oh no, they're going to take advantage of my feelings. So why would I even present that in the first place? So that's a huge misconception for sure.
Right. Yeah. Most women find it attractive.
Definitely. I do want to give you the opportunity to share what South Florida has going on, especially when it comes to, we just had a conversation about setting up healthy space, our skills. So whether it's an Adventures of Marriage class or Hope Weekend, just talk about South Florida a little bit and highlight anything coming up.
Well, we're like the other offices. We do pretty much the same thing the other offices. I mean, we are all independent at some level, but we're all offering the same programming. We just do it at different times. Last weekend, as an example, Jacksonville office had a Hope Weekend, and a South Florida couple went because they didn't want to come to ours because they felt like they were going to know people, and I certainly understand that and respect it. But June 23rd, we have our Hope Weekend, So we have our Adventures in Marriage classes, just like everybody else. Some of them we're able to offer at no cost because of a grant, and others we do privately where people pay to attend the class. And we are we're actually doing quite a bit right now with some of the churches, we've got classes scheduled all the way through the fall. They're all private classes. Anyone can go, but they're not federally funded classes. And then one of the things that we did feel that we needed to kind of focus on that I don't think the other offices are doing right now is singles. And the reason that we felt the singles were so important is that population is growing, and they're staying single longer. They're putting their jobs before their relationships. And one of our goals was to decrease non-marital childbirth and teen pregnancy. And in Broward County, about 48% of all of our childbirths are to non-married women. But if this tells you anything, in Broward County, the teen pregnancy rate per 1,000 is 8.8, and the national rate is 15.1.
Wow.
So that number has come down, but the reason that I point that out is not because of the success necessarily, because we certainly can't take credit for all of it. But what that tells you is we're still having a lot of non-marital childbirth, but they're not teenagers. There are the singles that are making choices. It's no longer oops, they're deciding we're going to live together. We're going to go ahead and have children, So we thought, you know what, we got to start talking to the people that aren't getting married because we want to increase the marriage rate. So we decided to launch a singles program targeting that age group that was 30 to 55. And we do something typically every month with them where it's experiential, but then there's teaching. I'll give you an example. We have something down here called kayaking under the moonlight, and it's at full moon. Yeah. And it only happens, obviously, one time a month. And so they did that with the singles, and then they did a picnic on the beach at night once it was over. And then they did a teaching about personalities being salty and some being savory with the food that they were eating.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that we've kind of honed in on is we've got to get to the people that are choosing not to marry, for one reason or another. So that would be the one thing that I would say is different than some of the other offices. But like the other offices, they do a lot of military, and we don't do any military. So, all the offices have their areas of expertise. And some of that does depend on where you're located. South Florida is very different than North Florida.
Very.
Very different. Yeah.
So with the single classes, have you seen, or do you guys touch upon, talking about feelings and emotions and things like that? I know you mentioned you kind of do a little teaching in there.
Yeah, we do. We do with every one of them. Like they had a Christmas party, and they had a dinner party, and then they built gingerbread houses. And at that point, they were talking about, who do you share life with, and what does that look like? I mean, we always bring it back to Jesus, but basically, I can say this because I didn't write this. Richard really did this curriculum, but the Adventures in Marriage curriculum is really outstanding. I mean, it is the best that is out there. And so what we do is we take from that, and we edit and we tweak depending on what the audience is. Like for the singles, so we take from there. But yeah, it's been a ride.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, it's been a ride.
Well, actually, did you ask any more questions?
Well, I mean, just if anyone wanted to get involved with you, what's the best way for them to get involved with the South Florida office?
We have a website. It's Live the Life SoFlo for southflorida.org. I'm sure they can go to the Live the Life website and click South Florida to see what's happening on there, but the websites are up to date. Or they can send an email to Lisa May at livethelife.org, or Amanda manages all the singles. They can email Amanda at livethelife.org as well. So yeah, we would love to hear from anybody and everybody that's interested in learning how to grow relationally.
And that's the big part of relationship. I like it. Well, definitely thank you for coming on. We've enjoyed you. You highlighted South Florida. You talked about different ways to communicate emotions healthy. So, we appreciate you.
Thank you so much. It was an honor to be with you guys. I look forward to seeing you soon.
Oh, yeah, for sure. See you later.
Bye. See you later.
Remember, we are now offering free classes in Florida through our Healthy Marriage Initiative grant. If you are interested, check out livethelife.org/aim. If you are military and you are interested in learning more about this program, you can reach out to us by emailing ashley@livethelife.org. Thanks for listening, everyone. I hope you feel educated, encouraged, and empowered to thrive in whatever relationship you're in.